Hey guys, today we'll be covering even more Week 1 tips I haven't covered elsewhere. Now some of these are a little out of the box, like using game crashes as extra saves to continue a run, or using Babe to turbocharge your early game. But let's get into it. After you get the hang of Week 1, you might want to use your Babe to farm early kills and loot. We're talking cash, water bottles, cigs, lighters, watches, and maybe even a set of keys if you're lucky, because it can be a little bit slow getting some of these, especially if you decide to do things in a strictly legal fashion. But it can be a little faster if you take advantage of Babe's bloodthirsty nature. And if the police happen to come in, perhaps you can even get a bulletproof vest and a holster. Because I don't know about you, but I sure hate running around with a gun in my pocket and no holster. And it's just a good idea to use Babe in this way because she often gets lost or dies, but this way, you can get your early game going before she kicks the bucket. Which leads into the second tip. You might want to choke down on your good Samaritan reflexes, because trying to help civilians in trouble, or even your Babe, is often more trouble than it's worth, leading to a permanent falling out with the love of your life, or a visit from power-tripping cops who want to serve you with a restraining order. So don't help people, or be prepared to face the consequences. Because with Week 1, that old saying, "No good deed goes unpunished," is often true. Third tip. Avoid going into places you aren't meant to go into. If you don't like copping civilian aggro, or getting shot by a rent-a-cop, you might want to avoid breaking into people's homes or going into the employee-only sections of various stores. But you should know that this doesn't apply to the kitchens of restaurants. You can go in there and take whatever you want, as long as you have money, of course. Which brings us to chat commands. To find out whether or not you're welcome somewhere, use the chat command by pressing T and saying, "Let me in." Then people will let you know if you're allowed in or not. But just so you know, being welcome in a space does not mean that you're welcome to all the items within the containers of that space. For instance, some people might let you into their homes, but freak out if you happen to raid the fridge. Kind of like real life. You can also use the "Let me in" command to find out if someone is in a building when you can't see or hear them. Empty buildings are usually pretty free to go inside because there's no one there to witness your crimes. You can also use voice commands in creative ways to get what you want, like telling a NPC in a doctor's office to join you so that they don't call the police when you decide to rob the place. And when you're tired of their company, you can tell them to go away. Or if you want to get into a place that's locked, you can threaten or curse at the civilians, and they'll probably open the door to come out and fight you. And sometimes you can tell them sorry, or ask them to join you to drop their aggro. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few of the currently useless commands like "help me," "give me that," "unlock the door," "sex," and so on. You can ask NPCs for help, but they never do, and you can ask them to give you things, but they never do that either. And none of them find you attractive enough to engage in more dubious activities. Oh well. Now let's talk about markers, because all those markers on the top of your screen are adjustable. You can make them go away by double-clicking them, or you can move them by left-click dragging them around. Now, in case it needs to be said, these represent events going on in your vicinity, and the green ones are friendly, the pink ones are neutral, the yellow ones are mildly dangerous, and the red ones are typically hostile, but not always. The red houses represent the bandit houses, but sometimes they're also the party houses, and you are actually welcome inside of those. Other times they're just bandit houses, so they are potentially dangerous, but you should visit them anyway because police and citizens will typically show up there and kill the bandits, enabling you to gobble up all that juicy loot like the little loot goblin that you are. And then on day 5, you're gonna see a bunch of red stars pop up, but it isn't because you suddenly became a target of the police department. This is indicating that the riot police with all the coffee have entered the scene, and you should really pay them a visit and make sure that they all die. Now, this will probably be a little controversial because most players seem to value the live, die, repeat cycle of Project Zomboid, and that's fair enough, but you should know that you can use game crashes as extra lives if you want, because if you make it far enough into week 1, your game is probably going to crash at some point, and then create an extra backed up save for you. Also, you should know that Slayer does recommend that if you die to restart a new game, but I've found I don't really have any problems respawning into the same playthrough, and to be honest, the best part of week 1 is the last couple of days. So if I happen to die right before then, I don't usually want to restart from the beginning. And it's not like you're really losing any progress on your skills or loot anyways, so why not just respawn? But now let's talk about some things that occur after week 1, when you're in the fallout. There's 2 things in particular that I haven't mentioned elsewhere that I find helpful after the nukes drop. The first thing is to be aware that basements will still have loot. All loot and loot containers on the ground level, besides that on corpses or in bags, will of course be destroyed by the nukes, which is actually a fairly massive barrier to your survival, and something of a killjoy when it comes to Project Zomboid, because there will be little to no point exploring and looting a town that has been nuked. But the silver lining is that there will still be loot in basements, which gives the gameplay a sort of bleak, buried treasure type of motivation to looting and exploring. And I'll just add here that if you're into the new possibilities with an outdoorsy, do-it-yourself type of playstyle, week 1 actually sets that up pretty well, because you're almost left with no other options but to survive off the land. It truly is a harsh, post-apocalyptic reality after the nukes have dropped. Which leads me to the next tip. You can use tin cans as a renewable water source. Now hear me out, because if you've been playing week 1 properly, you'll probably amass a fair amount of tin cans. And if you are trying to make a go of it in the Fallout zone, water might eventually become scarce. But it's going to be raining or snowing during the nuclear winter, and if you leave your tin cans out, they'll collect water. Then you purify them in the campfire, and bam, free, renewable water. Now, hopefully this won't turn you into a mutant or anything, but I don't think we have the technology for that yet. And that's really more of a stopgap measure for dumbasses like me who aren't really prepared for the nuclear fallout and don't have those carpentry books laying around. But anyways, that's gonna do it for now. I hope you found these tips helpful, but I'm out. Peace.